Hey guys, today on the program we're going to be looking at coffees from around the world, and I'm going to tell you what they should or could taste like. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome to the program. Today we're going to be talking about flavor profiles by region across the entire coffee world. Again, I'm Mike. Welcome to Ispirare Coffeehouse. Welcome to CoffeeShop Vibes, the program that helps or is supposed to help enhance your coffee shop, specialty coffee shop knowledge. Again, I'm Mike. My wife and I, we founded Ispirare Coffee. We took an abandoned storefront in our hometown and turned it into our county's first specialty coffee shop. We've tried coffees from every state in America by most of the top roasters, and we are real huge fans of coffee aficionados, maybe, but if you're like us, every time you're traveling, you'd like to explore new coffee shops. And this show is to help you enhance your knowledge about specialty coffee and the inner workings and what happens at the coffee shop. And so you can have a better cup of coffee or mocha latte, whatever you like. Anyway, today I'm going to give you kind of just this overview. The backstory is we just had a coffee at the coffee house. It's a natural processed coffee from Sumatra. And people that I know in the coffee industry were like, oh, this must be wrong. This must be a misprint. This can't be. It was a coffee. It was actually one of my all-time favorite coffees. And, you know, if you follow Ispirare and know me, you know how many coffees I've tried. But it was a Sumatran coffee that had strong notes of strawberry, some notes of vanilla, but just completely counterintuitive of what most people would think of Sumatran coffee would taste like. So anyway, it led me to think, okay, well, let's do a show to talk about what real flavor characteristics are there, if there are any, from different parts of the world. And of course there are. I'm going to give you or share with you my knowledge. When I go out, I look to buy coffees. I have some knowledge of what that coffee might or probably should taste like based on what part of the world it's from. And we're going to dive into that on today's program. Thanks for watching. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys can learn a little bit about specialty coffee. Also, this is the World Coffee Atlas by James Hoffman. It's a pretty good book. I might reference it a little bit in the show. But anyway, talks a little about the different coffee producing regions of the world. I'm going to focus on the main ones. And before I get into the main coffee regions and what their coffee should taste like, I have to give you a big disclaimer. You know, this is just a general rule of thumb. It's not always true. And the reasons it's not going to be true is because, again, the soils, the varietals, the elevation, all these can play a major factor. And also how coffee is processed. Now, most coffee is wet processed, but honey processing, natural processed coffee is becoming more of a thing here in specialty coffee. And that way of processing coffee, there it is, a Colombian coffee. It's a honey processed coffee. It makes a much sweeter coffee. So some of these micro lots that are honey processed or natural processed are going to really break kind of the mold. They're going to be much sweeter coffees. As well as roasting. A darker roast, of course, is going to taste darker, and a lighter roast is going to bring out some different nuances, different flavors. Most coffee you're getting in the grocery store, a lot of that coffee is darker roasted, and that kind of roasts out some of the imperfections, we'll say, in the coffee. But all those factors can play a role in how coffee can taste. Of course, the processing can really play a role. So again, this is not set in stone. This is just some general flavors that you will typically find. And we're going to start with the country of Brazil, the world's largest coffee producing country. All right, so Brazil. You know, it's on the equator. There's a coffee belt that really straddles the equator across the world. Brazil is the #1 producer of coffee. Different countries, especially if you travel a lot, if you're in Europe, maybe watching this show, because of whatever connections they had with the countries. Some countries like to import, like Italy imports a lot of coffee from Brazil. They also import a lot of coffee from Ethiopia. You know, some of these traditions go way back. So different countries like to, you know, import coffee from different countries. So anyway, keep that in mind. But Brazil, main producer of coffee, it also produces a lot of the what I would call general non-specialty coffee in the world. Now, Brazilian coffees, again, they can have all types of great flavors to them, but there is a defining characteristic in Brazilian coffees typically, and that's going to be peanut butter. Some Brazilian coffees, or most Brazilian coffees, will have subtle notes of peanut butter. Some might have very nutty profiles. It's used in a lot of espresso blends as well. So when you think about Brazil, when I think about a Brazilian coffee, right? All things being equal, I think that's going to have a little bit more nutty characteristics, a little bit more peanut butter characteristics, and a tad bit of chocolate. Now, all coffee across the world is going to have some chocolate to it, but Brazil, I really noticed the nutty flavors. Peanut butter is typically a very, very well-known trademark of Brazilian coffee. The whole purpose of this is to help you if you're ever out at a coffee shop and you look at different bags and they say it's from Ethiopia or they say it's from Sumatra, to give you some insights on what that coffee could taste like. I know a lot of people put some tasting notes on it. Sometimes that's, accurate or not accurate. Sometimes even the roast profile is accurate or not accurate. I've seen a lot of like medium roasts that are like extremely dark. So anyway, a lot of different things. The other country now I wanted to talk about, a very specific country, is Indonesia, Sumatra in particular, which is, we use that in our Inspire blend here. It is a chocolatey coffee. Now again, most coffees, as I mentioned, are definitely have notes of chocolate. It's almost unavoidable in coffee. But Sumatra is absolutely known for baker's chocolate in coffee. Indonesia, Philippines, those countries where it's a more wet climate as well, you get those rich, dark chocolate notes. That's why that coffee we did recently at the coffee shop, the natural process one from Sumatra that had the strawberries and vanilla, was just, caught people off guard in the coffee industry in general, because those notes don't really show up in a coffee from Sumatra, Indonesia. A lot of coffee comes from Sumatra. Again, those coffees are going to be rich in chocolate and just richer in general. If they're roasted right, they should be very smooth as well. So when I think about Southeastern Asian coffees, I really think about baker's chocolate or just rich dark chocolate notes in my coffee. All right, next is Africa. And I'm going to talk about Ethiopia in particular. They call it the birthplace of coffee. Now, most people think of Ethiopia maybe a very dry climate, but really the southern half of Ethiopia down here, where the coffee regions are, very high altitude, very jungle-like, very dense vegetation, some of the greatest soils in the world. Virtually you can grow anything in the world in Ethiopia or Brazil. They have just soils that we can't imagine here in the United States. They're so rich in nutrients. And Ethiopia, of course, has some tremendously famous regions for coffee. Samara, Chefi is a very popular region for high-end specialty coffee in Ethiopia. Because of the altitude, the different climates, and the soils, you can get a lot of different notes. But when I look for an Ethiopian coffee, and we're going to do one here for our anniversary, a special micro-lot coffee, I really think you pull a lot of blueberry and raspberry out of a really good Ethiopian coffee. So if you're looking for one of those, blueberry, raspberry, maybe a coffee more on the acidic side, Ethiopia, traditionally, especially coffee from Ethiopia, is going to give you those notes or can give you those notes. Now, as we move down to Africa, right, the coffee regions in Africa kind of go from Ethiopia south. Kenya is another big producing region. Tanzania is, as well, and Malawi and Burundi and those countries kind of right down the Rift Valley that produce coffee. I find that in most African coffees, they are going to be a little bit more acidic, right? Again, they can vary greatly, particularly Ethiopia, in the flavor profiles. You will get a lot of fruit-forward coffees. I've tried some coffees from Tanzania and Kenya that have very grapefruit flavor. Again, that little bit higher acidity, but a little bit more fruitier characteristics in them. Like I said, tangerine is very common from Ethiopia, Kenya, down the Rift Valley. So yeah, those are some of the notes you're going to look for in Africa. All right, so to recap, Brazil, I like to think peanut butter. Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Sumatra, chocolate, right? Africa, I like to think a little bit more acidity in the coffee, grapefruit, raspberry, blueberries, things like that, tangerine. Now we're going to get into the most complex region for coffee, which is, well, kind of Central America. Everything from Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Peru, those countries, it can really get interesting, and they're bringing forward some coffees with just a wide array of flavors. All right, so Peru. We'll start with Peru and Ecuador. Their coffees are not as developed as some of the high-end coffees in Colombia. Where Peru and Ecuador, their coffees are a little bit softer, a little bit more smoother, some notes of fruit, but not, and some notes even tangerine and orange as well, but not overpowering. And that's when I think about these coffees, and subtle notes of chocolate, nice, smooth, balanced, silky type coffees that are coming from these countries. They're increasing their game when it comes to processing and trying to bring forward some more flavors from these countries. But I think of these a little less flavorful of the coffees slightly to the north as you get into Colombia and Panama. All right, so Colombia, of course, everyone thinks of coffee, right? There's a lot of coffees that come from Colombia and Panama, but Colombia in particular, the high-end coffees in Colombia can have a wide range of taste based on the altitude, based on the varietal. And those can taste orange-like, they can taste chocolate-like. It is one of the most diverse countries in the world. So when it comes to Colombian coffees, famous regions like Nariño, I think you're just gonna have a little bit more fruit forward to it, but it's definitely not the true rule of thumb. I do think some specialty coffees, when you're buying specialty coffees at a specialty coffee shop, you're going to get Colombian coffees that taste very fruit forward. Now, if you're buying from a grocery store, you're getting a little bit cheaper versions of the coffee, and you'll probably notice a lot more chocolate notes. But good Colombian coffee can be very fruit forward, and I notice a lot of notes of orange and tangerine. Now, as you move up, is it called the Isthmus or the Peninsula? Anyway, up into Central America, right? You have Panama and Guatemala, and those countries are really where the highest end premium coffees are coming from. Coffees that can, will fetch over $100 a pound, the very, very 1% of the 1% of the 1% coffees, right? And those coffees are really dictated by the volcanic soils and the little microclimates. And those can be very, very fruit forward, even notes of jasmine in some of those coffees, depending on the varietals. But the true, I guess, the best way I can describe Guatemalan and Panama coffees are, they are some of the most fruit forward coffees. Even when they're not naturally processed or fermented to give a little bit more fruit or sweetness to it. You're going to get notes of tangerine, you're going to get notes of orange, you can get some notes of strawberry in those coffees. You can also get strawberry in African coffees as well, but I think the most fruit-forward coffees, or the juicier coffees, are coming from the regions of Central America, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Panama. Those are some of the most exciting kind of regions right now to get coffee, if you like a fruitier coffee. Now, if you like a true coffee drinker's coffee, right, you want to maybe stick with Brazil or Sumatra or some of those countries where you're going to get a darker, cleaner, kind of longer finished coffee than some of the more acidic coffees like you might pull out of an Ethiopia or like a Nicaragua. So again, general rule of thumb there. I know there's a few outliers like Kona, which is the only coffee grown really in the United States. That's going to be a more richer coffee, real dark coffee typically is how they roast that coffee. And like there's Jamaican Blue Mountain, that's going to have different notes as well. But generally speaking, here are my rules of thumb. Brazil, you're going to get peanut butter. Asia, Southeast Asia, you're going to get notes of chocolate. Africa, you're going to get the raspberries, the blueberries, maybe the strawberries, the grapefruits, the tangerines. It's going to be very, very unique coffees, a little bit more acidic. And then, of course, as you move up Central America, lower Central America, or lower South America, or upper South America, I guess, Peru and Ecuador, a little bit cleaner finished coffees. Colombia, you can get anything. You can get some really awesome coffees, as you know. Again, you might get some notes of orange and some really, really juicy coffees coming out of Colombia, tangerine as well. And then you get into Panama, Nicaragua, El Salvador, some of the high-end coffees from Guatemala. You're going to really get, going to be really affected by the volcanic soils, the microclimates, and you could get all types of things, all types of notes. Again, you could get the strawberry notes, you'll definitely get the oranges, the tangerines, even some wine-like coffees as well from those regions. It can be very diverse, and it's probably the hardest region to pin down when it comes to coffee. So if you like coffee, you probably have a different flavor profile. My likes are different than yours. Those are just some of my general rules of thumb when it comes to coffee from those areas. You can always ask the barista at your coffee shop or whatever coffee shop you happen to be in what it tastes like, and I feel that virtually everyone has a pretty good handle of what their own coffees taste like. So enjoy. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, if you have a chance, like the video, and we'll talk to you soon on another edition of Coffee Shop Vibes.